Welcome back to another questions and answers with His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
It is the month of July, and as usual, we have more questions for you. But I think people might be asking questions about Father Disposito. How is he doing, and how is his recovery?
He's doing very well. He's not using a walker anymore. He's walking on his own. He assisted at Mass on Sunday in cassock and surplice, and which is about a 35 minute attention span. I mean, since that he was able to concentrate, he didn't have to leave or anything like that, because he wants to see if he can say Mass. But it's one thing to assist. When you say Mass, there's a lot of intensive activity. You have to pay a lot of attention. So I don't think he's ready for that yet. But if you saw him, you would say he's just his normal self. His spirits are good. He is preparing his classes. He wanted to know what classes he had in September. That's a very good sign of ambition and energy and interest. And he went to the doctor, went back to the hospital for a checkup this past Friday, and they were happy with everything. So
I mean, we're about 5 weeks away from the beginning of classes. So do you feel like he might be able to start the academic year?
It's very probable, very probable.
And what does that mean for Father Barnes?
That means he can go back to Florida.
Are you?
I'd love to keep him here.
Are you going to let him go back? I think that's the question.
Well, yeah, no. Well, you see, he does. It sort of doesn't matter where he is in a certain sense, because he does a lot of the travel on weekends. But I do think he does something at the school down there. I think he does. So,
well, he could do that remotely too, Your Excellency.
He could. That's right. No, he's a great asset.
I know the faithful there in Pottstown have been saying it's been nice to see him when he is in town. As you say, he's out of town a lot.
And he's going up to Boston sometime in August too.
Oh, that's great. Well, for those who are just joining the live stream, remember, as usual, hit the like button and let us know where you're watching or listening from. We have a wide audience here today. We've got Atlanta, Bern, Switzerland, Texas, Binghamton.
Been there too.
Northern California, and of course Cambridge over on that island over there, Your Excellency. And Peabody, Massachusetts.
Don't know that. No.
Maryland. Jimmy Hunchin, 10 pounds. The live stream is now officially licit and valid. Thank you, Jimmy. I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to the Institute clergy responsible for the recent retreat in France. They are a testament to the strong intellectual and spiritual formation at the seminary.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jimmy.
I'll take all the credit for it.
All right. Our first question from email over the last month. Your Excellency, I would like to know the meaning of jurisdiction as related to priestly orders and how it is dealt with in our situation.
Well, there's two kinds of jurisdiction. One is jurisdiction to rule the church. The other is sacramental jurisdiction. The jurisdiction to rule the church belongs to the Pope and bishops and pastors. So that's the threefold level of jurisdiction in the church. So the Pope is in charge of everything. The bishop is in charge of the diocese. The pastor is in charge of his parish. See, and there are certain things the Pope obviously can make all laws. He's not even subject to canon law. Obviously he is bound by the faith, though. However, he can't just do whatever he pleases. And then the bishop may make laws for his diocese, and the pastor can make certain laws for his parish, certain observances, you might say, for his parish, so that it's all defined by canon law. That's the jurisdiction to rule. Sacramental jurisdiction means that you have the right from the local bishop to function sacramentally, so to say Mass, to hear confessions, to baptize, to anoint. See, that means you have a license from the bishop. That's sacramental jurisdiction. And in the case of confession, the confession is invalid unless you have sacramental jurisdiction. Right. The other, you need jurisdiction, for example, to consecrate a bishop, or jurisdiction to do ordinations, but that does not affect validity. In the case of confession, it affects validity. So the obvious question is, well, if you don't have jurisdiction from the local bishop, if the bishop is not there because he's a heretic, then what happens? What happens is that the jurisdiction is a restriction of the powers of the priesthood for a certain area. But in principle, he has the power to forgive sins of anybody. So if the restrictions are not there for because the bishop is absent due to heresy, then the priest can hear anybody's confessions. He has the power to forgive sins from his ordination.
Someone grateful for the more comfortable streaming time for Central Europe, someone watching from Bavaria. I do want to caution, this is not a permanent thing. It's because His Excellency is not in the academic year. He is teaching some classes, but we wouldn't normally be able to do it during this time because he would still potentially be in class or be dealing with academic things. So we are glad to be able to do it earlier for Europe, but it's not going to be something regular, unfortunately. Nick the Lefebvrist for $5. Nick, an infelicitous handle there. Did Pope John the 22nd hold a heretical or at least gravely erroneous view on the beatific vision, and does that fact make him an anti-pope?
Yes, he did. The theologians of the University of Paris, first of all, he said it as a private doctor. See, the Pope can write a book and just as a private theologian, make his thoughts known. You see, he's not teaching. He's not teaching into the church. So as a private doctor, he said that that when people die, if they are going to heaven, they don't get the beatific vision until after the end of the world. That's John the 22nd. This is 1300s. All right. And so the theologians of the University of Paris cited him. They said, this is an error or a heresy. I don't know which one they said, but he was in trouble, let's say. And he retracted. See, did it make him an anti-pope? No. Again, so I mean, the fact that he simply, let's say he held a heresy, again, distinguished de facto and de jure. If you want to even say de facto, the worst, did he hold it in a heretical spirit? See, that's what has to be proved by law. In other words, if somebody, a priest can get up in the pulpit and say a heresy because of a slip of the tongue, or because he just doesn't know any better, he could say something wrong. Does he become thereby? Is he outside the church because he has said that? No, his pertinacity in holding that has to be proven. And so people, jump to conclusions. You said a heresy, therefore you're a non-Catholic and get out of here. That's not the way the church operates. You have to, just as the court must prove your criminality, and there might be circumstances that disprove your criminality if you do something wrong. The church must prove the criminality. And so, no, there was nobody ever in all the history since the 1300s ever said that man was an anti-pope for doing that.
Your Excellency, do you not think that various smaller errors could already have been observed since the time of Leo XIII? For example, the involvement of Cardinal Rampolla or Pius XII and his Cardinal Tisserand, through whom the reciting of the Filioque was made optional for Slavonic Greek Catholics, or Pius XII and the liturgical reforms?
Well, let's take each one of those. Give me number one first.
The involvement of Cardinal Rampolla.
Well, Cardinal, I don't know of any heresies that Cardinal Rampolla pronounced. I don't think he did any heresies. He is rumored to have been a Freemason, but even that is disputed. All right. What is certain is that he was of liberal tendency. The idea being he was the one that encouraged Leo XIII to do the ralliement in France, rally to the Third Republic, and then the Third Republic will embrace the church and they'll be nice to us. That flopped, and that was the reason why the Austrian emperor intervened. It had nothing to do with his supposed Freemasonry, because there was Freemasonry in Austria. Austria was no angel from the point of view of interfering with the church, and it had a bad history of that. No, it was because Rampolla was pro-French, and they did not want a pope that was pro-French, and that's why the Austrian cardinal gave the veto, and then the conclave moved to Pius X. See, so that's the story of Rampolla. Who's next? What was the next question?
Cardinal Tisserand. And he says that the reciting of the Filioque was made optional for Slavonic Greek Catholics.
Well, you have to understand that Benedict XIV in the 1750s also permitted that in the East. And the reason is that the liturgical custom in the East, even for uniate Catholics in the East, was not to put in the Filioque, because it was the original Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. See, it was the Pope who added Filioque, I think, in the 1100s, and so it was just not done. It was just not done in the East, and so so Benedict XIV, perfectly good Pope, said that's all right too, as long as they believed it. In other words, they had to profess it. But they didn't have to recite it in the creed. So that's nothing new there.
Yeah, that's just following on from Florence Ferrara, Your Excellency. They said that you could, as you said, use their liturgy as long as they believed it. You didn't, in a sense, you didn't have to change your liturgy for us.
The Council of Florence also permitted that.
Yeah. So then that follows up with, what about the liturgical reforms of Pius XII? He's putting those all together.
Well, yes, the liturgical reforms of Pius XII were engineered by Bugnini, who was a thoroughgoing modernist and a Freemason. All right, and he started in 1948. He was put in charge of the Congregation for the Reform of the Liturgy in 1948. And everything that you saw coming out of Bugnini from that point on, that was the new Holy Week. He devised that in 1952, and then it became law in 1955. And then there were subsequent changes in 56, 57, and 58 under Pius XII. He, for example, he approved commentators at Mass. Now the priest is going to the altar, and some guy at the pulpit is. That was actually approved by Pius XII.
Yeah.
So his reign, yes, I think a book has to be written about the reign of Pius XII, because things don't happen overnight. Storms gather. And most of the prime mover bishops at Vatican II were appointed either by Pius XII or by Pius XI. All the liberals, the radical modernists at Vatican II were bishops appointed by them. That book needs to be written. What are the roots of it?
There's a follow-on to that, Your Excellency. If the lead up to Vatican II was so filled with modernism or modernists, could there have been a council that worked, a fruitful council on par with the history of the church?
Well, I wouldn't say that all the clergy were filled with modernism. The high clergy in Europe were, many of them, modernists, yes. And the powerful clergy in Europe, high clergy, by that we mean bishops, cardinals. But no, there was. I mean, I lived during the 1950s. Nobody was a modernist. There was nothing like that, and I saw it change in the early 60s, and it was a very tumultuous change, and I noticed it right away. So I think it's an exaggeration to say that the lead up to Vatican II was filled with modernism. No, that's not true. There were some traces of modernism before Vatican II. Absolutely, yes. So there was no reason to have a council. Absolutely no reason. That was, and as a matter of fact, Pius XII wanted to call a council to finish the council that was interrupted in 1870, but Cardinal Ottaviani told him not to because of the spirit of revolt among the bishops.
Well, we saw Cardinal Ottaviani was ultimately vindicated there. Someone wants to bring back your old glasses, but I think you've talked about this before, Your Excellency. These are not new glasses. These are just the glasses you keep
Computer
here.
glasses, yes.
Computer glasses. So you'll see His Excellency's regular glasses. Don't worry. He's
I'll put on my sunglasses.
Following up on the Cardinal Tisserand question, there are allegedly suspicions that he had connections with Freemasonry and that to some extent he was also a modernist. Is there any truth in this?
It's true that he was of modernist tendency, certainly. I can't pin down any heresies that he pronounced. As far as suspicion of Freemasonry, etc., suspicions are suspicions. It's very hard to prove because Freemasonry is a secret society.
Could Your Excellency tell us more about the sui juris heresy? In my view, it was an attempt to impose Phocian ecclesiology on the Eastern rites.
I have no idea what the sui juris heresy is.
Okay. I am writing to humbly and respectfully inquire whether the seminary or the bishops of the Institute have had the opportunity to review the recent episcopal consecration of Bishop Michael Mary, which took place on July the 25th, 2026 at Golgotha Monastery on Papastranze. Given the complexity surrounding these episcopal lineages and the importance of sacramental certainty in these times, many of the faithful look to theological clarity and prudence shown by the Institute for sound guidance. I would be deeply grateful to know if the clergy or the bishops of the Institute have reviewed the live stream and whether an opinion or statement has been formed regarding validity, invalidity, or a doubtful nature regarding the consecration.
I looked at the video very carefully and I determined that it is as valid as the day is long.
Okay.
All right.
Well, you have some experience with episcopal consecration, Your Excellency, so.
I checked it very carefully.
Okay. Jimmy Hunjin, £5. Thank you, Jimmy. Does His Excellency think Talleyrand's deathbed repentance was sincere? I don't believe that he had resumed any sort of sacramental life prior.
Talleyrand was just a slime ball. It's the only, everything.
That's an upgrade onto a big bag of dirt, Your Excellency.
Well, it was a big bag of dirt too. I won't say what Napoleon said about him.
Right. You can look that up.
Yes, but he was a side switcher and just a big ball of slime. That's what he was. To say, was his repentance sincere? I have no idea.
Well, you're saying side switcher. I think I'm remembering he was speaking to Louis XVIII and he said, why did you vote for the death of, my brother? And he says, well, it was the first service I was able to perform for your majesty. Right, because now he's serving as the counselor to the king.
Yeah, the typical slime ball response. Yeah.
Right.
That's because Louis XVIII would become the next king.
So knowing that he's a big ball of slime, Your Excellency, I'm hearing some doubt as to whether you think this was a sincere repentance.
I have a high doubt, yes.
He wasn't able to switch sides at the last moment?
I don't know. Only God knows. You'll have to wait until you see.
We'll find out at the general judgment, Jimmy.
Yes.
£20. Thank you, Jimmy. The further the SSPX advance into their ecclesiological Neverland to uphold R&R, are they objectively entertaining heresy in addition to schism? They certainly seem on track to become the Gallican Church of Saint Lefebvre.
Heresy. Well, they're implicitly admitting by their stance that the Roman pontiff and the church can teach heresy. In other words, they are logically committed to denying the indefectibility of the Catholic Church. Logically committed is not to profess it, however, but they are logically committed to it. So in that sense, yes, they are, I don't want to say they're heretics, but they're logically committed to heresy.
They're heading down a road is what you're saying.
Yes, and also they're infecting their people with a heretical attitude toward the papacy. that I call them now papacy vacantists. It's as if Rome doesn't exist. I mean, they have no use for Rome. They don't need Rome. If you don't like us, that's okay. We'll proceed. They're papacy vacantists, and they are placing that in the heads of their people, which I think is very, very dangerous, and that could lead to heresy. See, but they have a spirit of schism, and that is that we can carry on an apostolate in defiance of the said Roman pontiff, and that Pius IX said that is schism.
Well, not just that, you can consecrate bishops, even though he tells you not to.
Right.
With regard to the brown scapular, is the hot Florida weather a legitimate excuse to wear the metal rather than the traditional wool?
St. Pius X permitted the metal for that, for everybody, even the Arctic people, the Eskimos. Yeah, they can wear the metal.
Well, there was a short that went up in this week, Your Excellency, and it was one on you commenting on modest clothing. And one of the commenters said, well, obviously that sort of commentary doesn't apply to Texas and the hot weather we have down here. Is that true, Your Excellency, that modesty is weather dependent?
Absolutely not. No, it is. I mean, you could wear lighter clothing, let's say, in the sense that not so heavy as northern climes would require. But no, everything has to be covered properly. No see-throughs, etc.
Someone was watching a live stream of the seminary, Your Excellency, and they thought that when they were watching Mass that an altar server had received communion twice, and they just wanted clarification. Is that possible?
That's permitted, yes. See, that's what the priest would do if there are too many hosts. You see, you have to change the hosts every 14 days. So because our seminarians are on vacation, we had too many hosts. And so it's actually binding under pain of mortal sin to change the hosts every 14 days. So the priest actually, when he consumes hosts, sometimes you see a priest doing that. That's what he's doing. He's communicating twice and 3 times and 4 times. So it is also permitted, it's in the books, that you can call people back who have already received, and they can receive again.
Yes, so they're helping to consume the hosts in case, in this particular case.
So a priest might be stuck with 50 hosts or something like that, and he has to consume that.
That's fascinating, Actually, thank you for.
It's considered the same communion morally. In other words, it's considered one communion if it's at the same Mass.
Okay. What is His Excellency's position on buying Chinese-made products? May one do that with good conscience?
Well, I mean, we're practically obliged to buy them. I'm probably talking on a computer made in China. I'm guessing, we are obliged to we couldn't exist without them. But I would blame our government for having opened up China, which is a communist country. Before the 1970s, we would not even recognize the existence of their government. And they are a communist nation, and that was the same was true with communist Russia. It was Roosevelt who was himself, a radical leftist, and called Stalin the killer of 60 million people, Uncle Joe. He was the one that recognized the Soviet Union, but the United States did not recognize the Soviet Union, did not recognize China, communist China. So, I just think it. And so all of the manufacturing, a great deal of the manufacturing in this country went to China. See, the strength of the United States in World War II was its industrial base. It was able to put out planes and tanks and all of these things very quickly, and ships. And that's very much gone now. And we are dependent on this government that would attack us in a heartbeat. I mean, they're hostile to us. They buy up our farmland. They spy on us all the time. I mean, they are not an ally. If ever there's going to be a war, a major war, it's going to be between the United States and China. So I don't know why we have this idea that China is our friend. I think that all of that manufacturing helps tycoons and, let's say, a certain group of people. Because I remember back in the late 1970s, there were some, let's say, non-Christian people who were pushing the idea of opening up China.
When you say non-Christian people, you're actually, might they also be referred to as elder brothers by
Yes,
some other people?
yes, no. They were certainly Jews who were interested in opening up China, and I think the advantage is not because they're selling these things at American prices. They're not just not. It's not as if they're cheap. They're selling them at American prices, and somebody is profiting a great deal from the fact that things are manufactured cheaply, not only in China but in Vietnam and other places, and sold at American prices. Somebody is profiting a great deal. So I would say that it's our rotten government that is responsible for all of the Chinese products that we are dependent on just for normal existence. Practically everything you put on is made in China.
So your answer there seems your
barrel. We could have an American-made barrel. So.
But you're saying it's not immoral in that answering the question. It's not immoral to buy Chinese goods.
No, it's just a necessity. In other words, you're not obliged to boycott something if you would be put at some serious, how would you say, inconvenience or problem if you're boycotting it. And so no, it's very seldom that you would be obliged to boycott something. Seldom, because you need certain things.
The question of where can we watch the live stream? I put that in the chat. It's at MHT Seminary Live on YouTube. The stream, YouTube ends that stream periodically and then launches a new one. So we don't have a permanent link because that's the way YouTube works. But if you go there, you can always find that as well. $5 from Lamar Jefferson. Thank you, Lamar. Oh, here's your question. What is His Excellency's opinion of Opus Dei and Saint Jose Maria Escriva?
Actually, I don't know much at all about Opus Dei, except that it is weird. That little I know, I would say it's weird. It also is, I am led to understand, extremely rich. That they have a lot of money, and and that they. I'm told this, that they appear to be traditional, but in fact, in many ways, they are on the left in various ways. So that's all I've heard. I never did a study on them, and I don't know anything about Jose Maria.
I've only heard bad things. I'm going to put a link to an SSPX article that was done. I want to say in the 90s. It was in Cell de la Terre, but the title is A Strange Pastoral Phenomenon, and it goes into some of the irregularities of Opus Dei. I think it's useful. Someone's following up, Your Excellency. I think the sui juris heresy refers to the new structure introduced in 1990 when the concept of Eastern churches sui juris was established, something like autocephaly.
I never heard that. What do you mean by Eastern churches? That uniates or schismatics?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that in my whole life.
All right. Heading back up. If you are just joining the stream, there's 100 of you, 150 of you that have come into the stream since we've started. So if you haven't already done so, please hit the like button and let us know where you are watching or listening from. Jimmy Hunjin, £5. Thanks, Jimmy. Are there any works of Bishop P of Poitiers which His Excellency thinks should be translated into English?
All of them.
All of the above. There is a book coming out, Your Excellency, that Sean, I think we're getting a copy sent to you, but it's a French priest who did commentary on Cardinal P's work. So there'll be a copy.
Condemn that.
Which one? The
very book that you're mentioning. He said,
okay,
does not represent well Cardinal P.
Okay. What was his objection to it? Do you remember?
Just that. I mean, I don't know, and I haven't read that book, and I read very, very little of Cardinal P, but I just know what Cardinal P has said. He was great for the social reign of Christ and everything. I mean,
but it seems the book speaks positively of Cardinal P. But you're saying, but
relating what Father Gapin, who was a big, big fan of Cardinal P, he has in his chapel, he acquired in his chapel, the hat, the cardinalatial hat of Cardinal P. That's how much he was devoted to him. And so I take his comment seriously, that the summary of Cardinal P's thought was not true to Cardinal P.
Well, a copy. I've obtained a review copy for you, Your Excellency, so you'll have a chance to review it yourself.
Well, there's a lot that I have to do,
I know. No promises. Sede Trad, $5. Thank you, Sede. If they are on the path of heretics, why did His Excellency call them Catholics in another live stream, referring to the SSPX?
Well, because they are baptized Catholics and they have not been excommunicated by any valid pope or bishop. So, I mean, they profess the Catholic faith. See, so I would not take that away from them. It's just that they're, to be non-Catholic, you have to be professing a false religion that would automatically put you out of the Catholic Church, or you have to be separated by the authority of the Church from Catholic communion. See, so by the local bishop or by the Pope, right? So they, as far as we're concerned, they're not excommunicated. And they profess the Catholic faith. I would not take that away from them at all. So, but people get things mixed up. There's a juridical law, and there's the real world, and then there's the juridical world. In other words, you can't mix those things. So, they are Catholics. It's just they're misled, and they have taken Archbishop Lefebvre's, I would say, inconsistent line of thinking and pursue that. I mean, even now they are in the perfect place to blast Vatican II and say, this is the reason why we do what we do, because Vatican II has produced a new religion. Bishop Goldaddy said that in his speech, but he, pick up on it. As you're in the perfect position to justify yourselves that way. Not this, they wrote a letter the next day or something, we're with you. And when you need us, we'll be with you. And
right.
All of this. And, that's not what Archbishop Lefebvre did in 1988. In that sermon of 1988 at the consecrations, he blasted Vatican II out of the water. And they're not following him. We
read the letter of the superiors saying that they were very happy and they would also like to be excommunicated as well.
Yes. That Archbishop Lefebvre said, I'm consoled for them to say that I'm not a part of them, and I'm paraphrasing, but
right.
I mean, he did, and I think that's the true side of Archbishop Lefebvre. I think all of that diplomacy that he did, as a matter of fact, he said in the early 1990s, I went too far with the diplomacy. He made that comment. In other words, that the 1980s diplomacy went too far with it.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a 1991 interview that he did, Your Excellency.
Yes, and so they're not really following the founder there. If Archbishop Lefebvre were alive, he would have blasted away at Vatican II, and the whole world is listening to them. Unlike 1988, it was a relatively minor thing. The internet was not around. They're all over. They just
right.
perfect. They could give great interviews. What's wrong with Vatican II, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't.
So someone might follow up, Your Excellency. If you're saying the SSPX are Catholics, are you also saying that Novus Ordos, who they say they're professing the Catholic faith, that they're Catholics as well?
Well, it's one thing to say you're professing. The other thing is to profess it. No, Novus Ordites do not profess the Catholic faith. They profess a false religion. And that's why we call them Novus Ordites. They're baptized Catholics, but they profess. In other words, their external profession is a false religion. Now, they might be in good conscience, figuring, well, this is what we're told to believe. But still, their external profession is a false religion, and that would put them outside of the church.
All right, LDP for $5. Thank you, Luke. At what stage in the canonization process do we know that the person is without a doubt in heaven?
Oh, when it's declared. When he's canonized.
But Your Excellency, I mean, to become a blessed, you have to have obtained a miracle, correct? So would you be able to obtain a miracle if you weren't in heaven?
Well, the church does not declare somebody in heaven until canonization.
Okay, so
all
that's
it declares with the blessed is that it is legitimate to pray to them and to have a devotion to them in certain circumstances. That is, religious orders and so forth. In other words, that they have passed a certain level of canonization. But canon, the very word canon means law. And if you look at the declaration of canonization, it is very clear. I, with my, we, with our apostolic authority, declared, and that this person. So no, that's the only way you would know without a doubt that somebody's in heaven.
Said a trad $5. Does His Excellency have an opinion on influencers like Taylor Marshall?
Well, like Taylor, do I comment on Taylor Marshall or influencers like him?
Either, Your Excellency, it's your choice.
The only thing I would say is that a lot of the influencers are lay people, and nothing against them, but they are in an area where they are not properly trained and sufficiently trained to comment. Sacred theology is a deep subject. We teach it here for many years. They have 7 years of training here, and it's a science. And you have to look things up in books, and also you have to understand, just have a general understanding of how the church works, etc. And I noticed that they often make mistakes by imprecision. They mean well. I don't mean to knock anybody. It's just that being lay people, they be like if I spoke on, rocket science, what I think about rockets, and I'd just be, just lost, or something else, something less extreme, you might say, but civil law,
literature,
literature, yes, and I think of English literature. So I just think I see gaps in their education, and they can't help it. And it's a shame that the clergy are not doing what they're doing. And many of them are doing very good work by being influencers. And some of them are very accurate. But I noticed that most of them are lost with regard to ecclesiology, especially.
Okay. Sede Trad's following up with another $5. Thank you. And she's asking, Your Excellency, can we attend SSPX masses, and does the excommunication change anything?
Well, I would say you cannot attend the SSPX masses, not because of excommunication, because Leo couldn't excommunicate a
cat,
mouse, or a cat. He has no power to excommunicate anybody. He himself is outside the church because of his teaching of heresy, and he's a phony pope. So don't worry about that. But because they're offering their mass in union with somebody who is a phony pope, that puts the mass outside of the church. It means that it's not a Catholic mass, even though it's valid and even though the liturgy is Catholic. The fact that they associate it with somebody who is not a true pope puts it outside of the Catholic Church.
Just like the masses at the time of Henry VIII or during the constitutional clergy, Your Excellency,
the mass
Catholic
is
liturgy.
The act of the whole church. Christ is the principal priest at every mass. Question: is Christ in union with Leo? Is he unicum Leo? Question: if Christ is not, then you cannot be. If he is, then we should all be in union with Leo and submit to him, and then they are excommunicated. That's the way the logic goes.
I think that's a great point you make, Your Excellency. Michael for £10. Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Your Excellency. I believe I've heard accusations that Cardinal Leonard had his ordinations and consecrations were invalid due to intention because of his Freemasonry. How would you respond?
First of all, there is no proof that he was a Freemason. Secondly, Freemasons do not necessarily do invalid sacraments. The famous example was Talleyrand himself, who was a Freemason and whose consecrations were recognized by Pius VII. He consecrated people as a Freemason. So Pius VII recognized the bishops that he consecrated. So that's proof positive that being a Freemason does not necessarily in any way, and also the general principle of the church is that if you follow the Catholic rite, you are presumed to have a Catholic intention unless there is evidence to the contrary. Otherwise, how do we know that the priest who baptized you was not a Freemason, a secret Freemason? How do we know that? See, anybody, the confessor of Louis XVI was a Freemason. So it was quite popular in the 18th century to be a Freemason. even among the clergy. So it is not. If you start doing that, he might be a Freemason. You might as well dismantle the Catholic Church, because if everyone is under the suspicion of joining a secret society that does not show its lists of adherents, then who's to say who is a Freemason and who isn't? Maybe you're a Freemason. It just is absurd. So you have to go on externals. In other words, that the Catholic Church has to. So are the baptisms done or the masses said by the confessor of Louis XVI? Are they all invalid? How many of them became priests? That means they would be invalid priests and invalid bishops. Do you see that? I mean, you have to go on externals.
So if you'd like to know a little bit more, Father Cicada went into this on Interview on True Restoration. There's a link to it here. And that was also partially based on an article he wrote on the accusation of Masonic bishops. So both of those links are in the chat for anyone who's interested. Cat Lady gave 1,000 jewels. I don't know how that works, Yaxi. I wish they were 1,000 real jewels. I suspect there are some kind of YouTube currency, so I don't know what that is. This is less of a question than a comment. The Jews did 9/11. Watch Chris Bullen videos solving 9/11 PEN. I think this might be, I don't remember what currency that is, but thank you for the contribution. Jimmy Hunchin, 10 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. Some sacramentals have their blessings reserved to certain orders, such as the Chaplet of the Five Wounds to the Passionists. Given the crisis, can we exercise epikeia to have these blessed by our clergy?
Yes, again, this would be a case of restricting the clergy. You see, in normal times, yes, the blessings would be restricted to Dominicans or Capuchins or this, that, and the other thing. As a matter of fact, Dominicans could only bless rosaries. That was restricted for a long time. Yes, it was, but the church loosened up on a lot of those things. But
the one that comes to mind, the one that comes to mind is the scapular, Your Excellency. It got so popular, it was the Carmelites, and then everyone got the ability.
Yes, they got. I was given the scapular when I was 7 years old by the parish priest. So they were commonly, let's say, released to other clergy. So I think, yes, there's reason to assume that.
Santiago Fernandez for $50. Thank you, Santiago. And he has asked this question before. Is there a plan to put all these sermons from Bishop Sanborn into a book? If so, please have a Spanish version as well. I know you are all busy, but they would sell fast and well. And the very first sermon should be 2 + 2 = 5. He's told you before, Your Excellency, that he really likes that sermon. So
I have to remember what I said, but well, I hope you don't, because then everyone will find out what books I copied them from. You see? So I never have an original thought. It's always out of some book, but then you avoid heresies, though.
It's the same. It's the safest path. Yeah. And someone thanking you for this live stream, Your Excellency. American Watchdog for $5. Thank you, Watchdog. Opinion of Father Feeney. I found the book after the Boston heresy case to be very inspiring. The denial of extra ecclesiam nulla salus seems to be a root cause of false ecumenism.
Yes, ecumenism. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as non-false ecumenism. That is a construction of Novus Ordo conservatives.
Oh, there's true ecumenism and false ecumenism?
Yeah, all ecumenism is false. Totally 100% false. There is no such thing as good ecumenism. That's the first thing. And yes, Father Feeney actually was reacting to early ecumenism in Boston, and Archbishop Cushing was very liberal. And he was reacting to it, but he overreacted. And yes, it is a dogma of the church that outside the church there is no salvation, which means that the church is the unique source of salvation. And that if you are outside of the church through your own fault, that it is impossible to save your soul. See, but Father Feeney denied what the church commonly teaches, and that is, if you are in invincible ignorance of the true faith, and if you posit certain other acts, such as the virtue of faith and perfect contrition, that you can be justified. That is, that means that your soul can be in the state of sanctifying grace. There are many people that posit those acts, Catholics, or I should say, people who are converting from Catholicism to to the Catholic Church who go to their baptisms already in the state of sanctifying grace because they have posited those acts. See? But they must be baptized, obviously. But they are already in the state of sanctifying grace. This is the teaching of the church. This is not some sort of 20th century wishy-washy, theology. This is the teaching of the Catholic Church. And so Father Feeney was truly a heretic and very attached to his own ideas. And if you look as far back as the fathers, you would have to consider St. Alphonsus, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Ambrose, St. Augustine, all heretics if you follow Father Feeney. And you would have to consider the constant teaching of the church to be heretical. Pius IX, a heretic. Okay. It's just it is a common teaching of the church. St. Ambrose too, he would have to be a heretic. I mean, you would have to be crazy or so prideful to say my theory about this is better than the minds of all of those doctors of the church. You would have to be as prideful as the devil to say that.
Well, yeah. So you have a lot of experience with this over the years with people who are pertinacious here. Will His Excellency ever have a public conversation with Bishop Waugh? Does the Institute condemn those affiliated with him or those who hold an imperfect general council as a remedy to the crisis? Condemns a very strong word, Your Excellency.
Well, as I always say, I'll talk to anybody. I mean, I have nothing against Bishop Waugh. In the sense of, sure, I would talk to him. And I'd even have a public conversation with him. Yes, I would not hesitate to do that. Does the RCI condemn? Well, we don't condemn. We think that they are misled, those who are affiliated with Bishop Waugh in Quebec. And yes, we think that the idea of an imperfect general council is something that is very, very bad, a very bad idea. And also that it would be invalid because for an imperfect general council, you need bishops who have jurisdiction. In other words, bishops of dioceses. That is the theology of it. Just bishops who are made, as I always say, to be sacrament givers. That's what we are. In other words, we have no jurisdiction. We don't have the power to rule the church. We are just given the consecration in order to do confirmations and ordinations and consecrations of bishops. They cannot rule the church, and you're trying to elect somebody to rule the church. And also, I think it would bring down opprobrium upon the traditional movement, and especially the Sedevacantists, for them to do such a thing.
I think you've used the word crazy before to refer to this idea, Your Excellency.
It is a crazy idea. I mean, it's so absurd. And there's 3 or 4 popes right now, phony popes. I mean, not only the one in Rome, but and these people that were elected by their entourage and all of that. And nobody pays attention to them. They walk around in white cassocks and they're just absurd individuals. That's what the poor man who accepts this designation to be pope, quote unquote, is just going to be an absurdity. And they should not do it.
Jimmy Hunjin for £5. Thank you, Jimmy. Liber Condemnationem would be a great title for His Excellency's sermons contra the Novus Ordo.
Well, I'll leave that to my posterity to do that.
Father LeMay has a comment here, Your Excellency. I'm shocked that His Excellency never had an original thought. That's cheating to get sources from the other ones.
Well, I confess to cheating. No, I will always go to some book to at least be informed about what I'm saying, so I don't say something stupid. And I try to explain it as best I can. But I very seldom have an original thought, and if I did, I would mistrust it.
Blessings on you from France, Your Excellency.
Oh, merci beaucoup.
Does His Excellency have any insight as to why the Greek word epousios from the Our Father is translated as supersubstantial in Matthew's Gospel, while at the same time being translated as daily in Luke's Gospel?
I looked this up. And in the Greek, well, first of all, let me see if I can say it right. Epousion as an adjective it comes from epi in Greek, which means over, above, and ousia, which means substance. All right. And it's an adjective made from that. So supersubstantial is correct. And I checked the Greek of Matthew and the Greek of Luke, and both of them have the same adjective. So our Lord definitely used that adjective, supersubstantial. No doubt about it. Now, the question is why St. Jerome or whoever translated it into Latin used daily, because it doesn't say that. You know? Yet that has been the Our Father in the Western world. I don't know what the Greeks say. I assume they take it from the Greek, but even in the Latin, quotidianum means daily. Now, some of the commentators say, well, supersubstantial means something that would keep us going forever. You know, so the idea being that not just one loaf of bread, but something that would keep us sustained. It could be that, but I mean, it's a mystery. I'll keep on looking it up. But even Cornelius a Lapide, who comments everything, he comments on the chickens that the Holy Family had.
Right.
He comments everything. He did not explain that sufficiently, at least to my estimation. Why the translators in Latin and in all the modern languages say daily. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think the follow-up might be, Yersi, could I say the Our Father and substitute supersubstantial in for daily?
Well, it's not a heresy. I mean, it's the Greek. It is the Greek. And the Greek is the inspired text. Everything, all translations are not inspired. The Greek is inspired. And the fact that it occurs in both means certainly that is the word that our Lord chose.
Okay.
Now, he was speaking in Aramaic, but I mean, the fact that it occurs in both Gospels means that it's certainly his word.
Jimmy has returned with another title suggestion here, Your Excellency, for £5. Thank you. I'd also like to read His Excellency's assessment of the post-conciliar pontiffs. I might suggest a working title: Every Circus Needs Its Clowns.
Yes, that's good. He has a lot of good input, yes.
Michelle Santaquilani for $10. Thank you, Michelle. I'm teaching the Aeneid once again this year for Latin students, and your demotion of literature to minimal status still bothers me. Should I take up plumbing, perhaps?
No, the Aeneid is magnificent Latin. I mean, it's the standard of Latin poetry, and it's just that it's just not my taste to get involved in the stories of Aeneas and where he was going and all the problems he had, etc. I mean, you would study it for Latin style. Leo XIII wrote hymns in Aeneid style, in other words, in that Latin style, the dactylic hexameter. So no, I mean, if that's what you like, that's fine. I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying I don't like it. Just the facts, ma'am. In other words, I just want to know history. I want to know what happened. I want to know theology, just facts. I'm not interested in literature at all. That's just me, and I'm open to criticism on that.
Right. And it said before that it's okay if you don't like the same composers that His Excellency. He's not speaking here of something on the faith. This is personal.
I'm not infallible, and I don't do definitions.
Yes. When His Excellency talks about literature, I always think of de gustibus non disputandum, right? That's His Excellency's taste and preferences. It is not church teaching about literature. It appears that His Excellency is a cat person and not a dog person. Does he have any thoughts on owning a dog, and is it okay for a priest to own a dog?
Yes. I actually I know I condemn dogs a lot. I actually like well-behaved dogs. There's a neighbor, his name is Mr. Scolastico. He lives across the street, and he has a very nice black, what do they call those?
Labrador?
A beautiful dog, very well behaved. He stops and talks to me. The dog doesn't bark. He doesn't, try to get away or something. Now, I actually like well-behaved dogs, but many dogs, and I would say even most dogs, are not well-behaved. And they bark at you. They want to bite your ankle. A
lot of times they didn't get proper training in the beginning, and if they had been trained, they would be better behaved.
I had a grandaunt once that had a Cocker Spaniel that you wanted to just shoot. It was a very, very badly behaved dog, and I got a bad taste for dogs at that point.
Right.
And but one thing about dogs is that they're a lot more care. You have to give them a lot more care, and priests travel a lot. So even my cats, I have to get people to take care of my cats when I'm away, and that's relatively low. But a dog, it requires you have to go out, you have to take them outside and everything,
Right.
and they're not house trained easily. Cats, all you have to do is show them where to go, and that's it. It's amazing.
Well, but they also do wake you up at 4 a.m. demanding food, Your Excellency.
Usually 3 a.m. Yes, I got it at 3 a.m. last night. Yes, demanding because he's hungry.
As you say,
comes back and sleeps on the other side of the bed.
As His Excellency has said, cats do not have owners; they have servants.
Yes.
And that's how they are. So that dog cat question was from J. Ryan Whittlesey, who contributed $100 for a number of questions. He didn't think he could make a live stream. And if that's you in the future, if you don't think you can make a live stream, you can always send a donation ahead of time and ask your questions. Ryan also had a question about the Knox Bible, Your Excellency. Is it acceptable to use it? It received an imprimatur.
Well, first of all, imprimatur, that's the way it's pronounced. It is just means that there is nothing contrary to faith in it, in the opinion of the local bishop, and the local bishop probably never ever read it. He gives it to a censor librorum, one of his priests, who reads it, and he comes to the bishop and says it's okay. So I mean, there's nothing in it. It's not an absolute that it has an imprimatur, but it's good. It's just that I call Ronald Knox's translation Bible stories, because he is so loose with the translation that it's a nice it's like seeing a Bible movie, but you can't really quote it. And Ronald Knox had tendencies to modernism, at least by reputation. Tendencies and things like that. He was not a staunch anti-modernist. Let's put it that way. So. But I think his translation, I just throw it in the garbage when I get them. Sometimes they come in for one reason or another. I just throw it in the garbage. It's Bible stories.
All right. I was trying to look for an example here, Your Excellency, but I may have just I'm going back to St. Luke a lot these days, and this is the Knox translation, Luke chapter 1, and. Into her presence, the angel came and said, "Hail, thou who art full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women." She was much perplexed at hearing him speak so, and cast about in her mind what she was to make of such a greeting.
Yeah, that's Bible stories. That's a nice, I mean, it's not inaccurate, but it's not what the sacred scripture says.
So that's your criticism. You want more exact translation.
Yes, it should be exact. And it's, there's nothing irreverent about that. There's no word that says she was perplexed. No, it's a very well-known passage.
Okay,
he made that up. See, so no, I would not recommend Ronald Knox at all. The Douay-Rheims version is the only English version that is useful.
Continuing on from Ryan's set of questions, it appears obvious that the Greeks went into schism due to a prideful nationalistic attitude, which seems to have been absent in the West at the time. Why was this phenomenon so prominent in the East and not the West?
Because of Constantinople. You see, the Constantine in the early 300s transferred, or maybe the early 300s, yes, transferred the capital of the Roman Empire to Constantinople, and he took up residence there. So they called themselves the Second Rome, and they called Rome in Italy Old Rome. And it is true that Old Rome became sort of a widow. In other words, how do you have an imperial Roman Empire without an emperor in Rome? So it became undefended, and it finally fell to the barbarians, etc., neglected. And so the old Rome was not, it was sort of superseded by Constantinople. Also, Greeks in general are very nationalistic people. I mean, I have known Greeks, and they're very nationalistic about Greece. And so I think that it's just part of their how would you say their upbringing or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's part of it, is that they're very prideful of their heritage, and their heritage is something that is very outstanding. But I think the main thing is the jealousy that Constantinople had of Rome. Constantinople was furious when Pope Leo II, the Saint Pope Leo II, crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the West. They were furious because all of that was considered Roman Empire still, but they neglected the western part. They were not defending it against the Lombards and various other peoples who were making trouble in the West. And that's why Pope Leo wanted somebody in the West to be the emperor. So, and it was not without precedent in the Roman Empire, because there were emperors. There was a division of the empire into East and West, done under Diocletian, and so it was not without precedent. But they took it as a slap in the face to Byzantium, and which is Constantinople, and that just festered with time, and I think that's the reason for it. But yes, it's mostly political.
And they say you add a fourth crusade and things get worse.
Fourth Crusade was a disaster. Although they were largely the Greeks, that's another show, but the Greeks were largely responsible for that because they were dealing with the Turks.
Mm-hmm. Continuing on with the questions from Ryan, archaic language seems to be very common for translations of Catholic prayers or literature into English. Hath instead of has, thou instead of you, words like beseech, vouchsafe, etc. Why is this, and is there any reason to keep it this way instead of updating the language to contemporary forms when translating?
Yes, the Douay needs to be updated. It was updated in the 1750s by Bishop Challoner. I have the original Douay from the late 1500s. If you want to see archaic, it's very archaic. And he updated it in the 1750s, and that's what we read now. The problem is that translations of sacred scripture must be approved by the Holy See. See, so the Holy See being absent for a long time now, I mean, even if we were to sit down and do a faithful updating, we can't use it because it can't be approved. So we just have to put up with, those archaic words, and that they work for a penny a day, which,
right.
That's the denarius. That should be a denarius, which was the pay in Roman times to a common worker. In other words, a construction worker, or did work with his hands. That was the denarius. Comes from the word for a day. And so, I guess in the 1750, that was a penny was about it for the same thing. But times have changed since 1750. So, no, he's definitely right. It should be updated, but it has to be updated correctly, and it has to be approved.
And I along those same lines, we adjacent to that, in English, we don't have a distinction between a formal you and an informal you, but in French there is, and that expresses itself in prayers and as translation. Is that also important? If a French person is addressing our Lord, is that important to keep those distinctions?
Well, first of all, let me correct you. In the Bronx, they have yous, plural. Okay, so
there are some regional variations.
I've heard use guys. All right, so there is some distinction here. But yes, the you is actually the formal version in English. Thou was the original, I'd say, familiar version. But yes, and you was formal. You see, and but now everybody gets formalized. It's like vous in French. Everybody in English, everybody gets vous. But each language has its customs. The Germans say du. And very traditionally, they use du, which means you, singular, thou. You see, so thou is actually a familiar form. So the French tu is offensive to traditionalists because they always use vous for God. And then with Vatican II, it's tu. You see, and the Germans always had du for God, ages and ages. Well before the council, they did not say sie, which means they in German. That's the formal in German. Sie means they. In Italian, the formal is lei, which means he or she. Lei, or voi, which is even more formal in Italian. So every language has its ways of talking to God. So I don't think you can make a general principle or a general idea.
You would just lean on the tradition, Your Excellency, yes, I think.
Tradition, yes. What was done before Vatican II?
We have a lot of philological questions today, Your Excellency, about translation. I read recently that the most commonly used English translation of the minor doxology, which translates secula seculorum as world without end, was translated by Thomas Cranmer. Is it preferable to say the prayer in Latin or to say forever instead of world without end?
World without end is very traditional. I don't know if Thomas Cranmer was responsible for it or not, but what is true is that it has been adopted by the Catholic Church in all Catholic missals. And so the forever and ever is Novus Ordo. And there's nothing wrong with forever and ever, but it has the Novus Ordo stench on it. So it's like Holy Spirit. There's nothing wrong with Holy Spirit, but it has the Novus Ordo stench on it. So something to avoid. And so Secula Seculorum, that means it's a Hebraism, the ages of ages. The Hebrews said things that way. And so it's a Hebraism. And it's various. The ages of ages doesn't mean anything in English, so you had to in some way render it.
Well, and the fact that Cranmer did it does not in and of itself make it problematic. I think that's the other issue.
Cranmer, don't forget, Henry VIII was first a schismatic, not a heretic. He actually never became a heretic. He was a schismatic. See, so there's no heresy in what Cranmer did.
Good music for the soul, and I found out that's a Peruvian currency, so seven, right, whatever that is, souls. How to find a wife if there aren't sedes in Peru, Your Excellency?
Stay single. No, it's very important that husband and wife agree on religion. Right. The most important factor. So if you can't find a wife that doesn't agree on religion, then I would suggest it'd be better to remain single.
Why is rock music so bad for the soul, Your Excellency?
Because it emphasizes the three elements of music are melody, harmony, and rhythm. Melody appeals to the intellect. See, harmony appeals to senses, and rhythm appeals to your body. So Gregorian chant is very good for the Mass because it's pure melody. There is no harmony and there's no rhythm, and there's no set rhythm. There's a rhythm in it, but when I say rhythm, I mean something that you could put a metronome to, back and forth. When you hear that, your body starts moving. So when you hear something that is very, very rhythmic, with what we call dance rhythms, your body starts moving because it's appealing to your body. There is some rhythm in your body that it's appealing to. So rock music, apart from all of the filth that it talks about, if we just lay that aside, just from the point of view of music, it is grossly inferior. I wouldn't even call it music because the soul of music is melody. You can't whistle a rock song. You can come out of an opera, say, and whistle something like La Donna e Mobile or something.
I would have thought that would be the example you would have given your ex.
Well, I can sing it for you.
But I was going to say, when you said it, the music immediately entered my brain. When you said it, I heard the song.
Or something, let's say, the Non più andrai of Mozart, a very famous aria in Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. But there's something that your intellect can reproduce because it is appealing to the intellect because it's balance and order. See, and then harmony is not bad because it's just like color appeals to your eyes. It's sensitive, it's sensual, you might say, in a good sense. See, there's nothing wrong with that. But think of modern art where you have just colors, where there's an absence totally of anything that is intelligible. Then you have colors splashed on canvas, and there is nothing. It's just nothing for the intellect to just it's a lot of garbage. You see, and people look at it and they think, what does that mean? Because it doesn't mean anything. So rock music has that same quality, is that the main ingredient of it is the rhythm. It sounds like something out of the jungle. And so it is, I wouldn't call it music. I would just say it's cacophony put to rhythm.
I think that's a good definition for your Excellency.
It's from the devil. I'm convinced it's from the devil, and that they will play it nonstop, loud, in hell. I'm sure of it.
As always, His Excellency is very restrained in his opinions. We're more than halfway through the stream. If you haven't already done so, please hit the like button and let us know where you are watching or listening from. Nicole E, $2. Thank you, Nicole. Besides Breen, what is a good introduction to Scripture?
There's a few others, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. I have them on my shelf. There's some very good ones that are not as deep as Breen. Breen is deep and is meant for the seminary, but there are some others that are not so deep, but are very, very good. And I just can't remember the authors right now. And one particularly is available. It's been reprinted. But I just can't remember it right now.
All right. Michelle Santo-Quilani for $10. Thank you, Michelle. Like Stephen, I've had a long journey towards sedevacantism. Along the way, I met Father James Wathen, author of The Great Sacrilege. Did you ever run across him? I know he admired Father Feeney.
No, I never met Father Wathen, and yes, he was a Feeneyite. He adhered to the principles, the doctrines of Father Feeney. So, I mean, perhaps he meant well. I'm not judging him, but I'm just saying that objectively he was holding doctrines which are condemned by the church. So that's all I could say about him.
Okay. Teodoro Boggio, $5. Thank you, Teodoro. Does the church require new churches to be built facing east? Or when was this no longer required? Where in canon law does it offer directions on this?
If possible, they should face east. The altar should face east. The Roman churches face they face east, and the altar faces east. See, and that's why you think that, well, the altar in St. Peter's is facing the people. No, it is not. It is facing east. And if the Pope, a true Pope, were saying Mass there, he would not say Dominus Vobiscum to people in front of him, but he would turn around to people behind him. See, so it means that the position of the altar was simply to face east. So the ancient Roman churches had that. The front of the church was facing east, and the altar would face east. But then later the altar would face east in the sanctuary of the church. So that means it was reversed. So the front of the church would be facing west, and then, but you do what you can. Sometimes it's not possible to have the church face east. Give me, as I always say, give me $50 million. I'll build you anything you want. I'll pick a site where it faces east, and everything would be fine. But sometimes you don't have those means.
Right. Or if you have a mission Mass in a hotel room, if you were to try to put it east, it wouldn't work with the configuration of the room. So
the reason for east is that the church looks forward to the second coming of Christ, which will be in the east.
So if you can, is your answer, Your Excellency, if
it's possible, yes, and you should strive for it. But many times we're buying churches from Protestants because the Novus Ordo will not sell them their church, sell to us their churches. So
they won't sell them to you, Your Excellency, because there's nothing worse. The lepers.
They sell them to Muslims. There was just a church in Detroit, I think, Detroit Archdiocese, that was sold to the Muslims. But they will not sell them to us. They put in deed restrictions that are so explicit that you could not possibly get around them.
Yeah, I suppose they're channeling the idea better the crescent than the tiara.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
is infelicitous.
No, we are the scum of the earth to the Novus Ordo, and
Yes.
proud of it.
Teodoro Boggio, $10. Thank you, Teodoro. Modesty in dress is always controversial among traditionalists who cite inconvenience, exposing even torso. Do the vast majority of women who you correct on this matter leave chapels for good?
I wouldn't say the vast majority. I would say some do. And some do, and if they do, they do. You know, we have our standards, and everyone has to observe them. I would say most people conform.
Nicole E for $10. Thank you, Nicole. Can you speak about consecrated life and virginity? Is that an option today for young ladies who are interested in that, but not called to the Sisters of St. Thomas Aquinas or the IMBC sisters?
Well, yes. I mean, you could make a private vow of virginity and consecrate your life to God that way. Yes, you can do that, but you would want to talk to a priest first, a prudent priest, before you would do that. You see, so you certainly but that would be a private vow, and you can be dispensed of that for some reason if you have a good reason by just any confessor. No, that's there are examples. I think Saint Catherine of Siena, or there are cases of that in history of people. We just had Saint Martha. I mean, certainly she's venerated as a virgin, and she was not a nun, obviously. You know, so yes, it's possible to do that.
Well, adjoining that, Your Excellency, per Matrimad Filium for $10. Thank you. Was Saint Martha present with her sister for our Lord's Passion, Death, Ascension, and Pentecost?
I don't think there's any evidence in sacred scripture for that. I don't think she's named.
Okay. But just because she's not named doesn't mean that she wasn't there. We just don't have
She could have been there. Definitely. She could have been there. You know, we just don't know.
Good Music for the Soul. Again, 7 Peruvian souls. Thank you. Why did Protestantism not rise in the East?
It did. Because they both hated Catholicism, the Eastern schismatics warmed up to the Protestants and accepted many of their doctrines. I mean, they didn't know that if you look at the history of it, because what they had in common was the hatred of Catholicism.
And this is a bit of a contingent question, Your Excellency, from Greg Panico for $10. What is your opinion of Taylor Marshall's opinion of the July 1st SSPX consecrations?
Actually, I didn't listen to his podcast or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what his reaction was. So
I think I haven't listened either, but it does seem that he has people have said thrown people over the boat, or he said, you know, they're definitely excommunicated, etc. Which if you don't know what he said, then you can't.
Well, I did hear that. You know, I just can't comment directly. But I mean, I would say, I mean, just listening to him in prior podcasts, I think he fails to understand the deep problem in the church. I think he's talking about symptoms and not about the actual disease in the church. The problem is that you have somebody who is elected to the papacy, but is teaching falsehood and heresy to the Catholic Church. That is the central problem. If you're not talking about that, or if you avoid that for some reason, then you don't know what you're talking about. See, then you're just hot air. And, you know, a lot of these influencers are, Leo said this, isn't that terrible? Isn't this awful? It's terrible, awful.
You got to wring your hands, Your Excellency.
Yeah, wringing hands and it's, you know, what else is new? I mean, did the sun rise this morning? You know,
right.
What's the phase of the moon? You know, what else is new that these heretics are acting like heretics? You know, but they somehow think that there's a catharsis or some sort of purification by hand wringing over these things, and all they're talking about is symptoms of a very deep disease, a cancer in the church, and the cancer needs to be cut out, and that's the position that they should take. But I think they would lose a lot of their clientele.
Yes. It doesn't pay to be sedevacantists, Your Excellency, financially.
It pays very poorly.
Jimmy Hunjin for £5. Thank you, Jimmy. One cannot spell Catholic without cat. Someone once said that they are a sign of predestination.
Yes, I don't know who said that, but it must be a very
I know
wise person.
that same person also said it's a mark of great intelligence. I think someone.
Yes, it is true. Yes, it's true. Yes, so all the. You know.
JGB $777 $50. Thank you, JGB. God bless Bishop Sanborn and all the priests of the Institute, and also mentions me. Thank you, JGB. Michael for £5. Thank you, Michael. What would His Excellency say if asked for evidence of John the 23rd's defective intention for accepting the papacy?
Yeah, that is a disputed question. My opinion, I would say, is that given his thoroughly modernist background from the time he was a seminarian and his friendship with people who were excommunicated later for modernism when he was a seminarian and as a young priest, among them Buonaiuti, who was a flaming modernist. And given all of his career at promoting modernist here, there, and the other place, modernist themes, you might say, and doing modernist things. And then his activity at the council, where he always caved into the modernist European clergy to open up the path to a modernist council, even though there were others complaining of the direction of the council. He would always give a path to those who were the leftists. I would say also the fact that he was suspect of modernism. He was declared suspect of modernism in 1914 by Cardinal Delay. All right, he was he also was close to the bishop in Bergamo, who was at the time very of great modernist tendency, Radini Tedeschi. All right, it was famous among the left-leaning modernist bishops at the time. I mean, his whole career is one of modernism, and so I think that the idea of changing the church into a modernist church was in his intention. And, he lied about the council. He said, I had an inspiration to have the council. He talked about it in the early 1950s as a cardinal.
Imagine me, a modernist, Your Excellency.
Yes. No, but it was already being spoken about. And, he said, I had this inspiration to have a council, in 1958 or something. And that was a big lie. So, I think that my opinion is that he was not a true pope for the reason of all of those reasons. That he was manifesting the intention to overthrow the Catholic religion in the institutions of the church and replace it with a new religion.
Good music for the soul. 18 Peruvian souls. Thank you. Did you know that the Jews financed the invasion of England by William of Orange? Francisco Lopez Suazo did, and since William, England belongs to the Jews.
I'm not surprised. I didn't know that, but I know that historically the Jews financed everything that would somehow bring down Catholicism. They were always on the side of anything that would destroy the establishment of Catholicism in any country. But I think it was Edward I that let them back in. No, Edward I exiled them, and Henry VIII let them back in. So they were already there. Henry VIII let the Jews back in. But yes, when England was attempting to become Catholic again, I'm not surprised at all that. Don't forget, Holland was, let's say, a refuge for them. In other words, that they were expelled from Spain and Portugal. Spinoza is a perfect example. They were expelled from other countries, and they went to Holland. So I'm not surprised. William of Orange was the king of Holland, and so I'm not surprised that he was to hear that. I'm not deeply familiar with the history of that.
Cat Lady for $20. Thank you, Cat Lady. Recently, we've been attending Mass with the Priestly Society of Trent, Bishop Martin Davila. We introduced ourselves to the father celebrating Mass at the end, and when we brought you up, he made a nasty face. Why is that?
I'm trying to think of who Davila is. Who is Davila? Is it Mexico?
Yeah, that's Mexico. That's Trento, Your Excellency.
Well, you'd have to ask him. I don't know. I never met him. I don't think. I don't think I ever met him. I don't remember meeting him. And but Trento doesn't have a great reputation for their training of priests. I'll say that.
So sorry about the bad face, cat lady, but don't worry about that in regarding to His Excellency. The Sump Pump guy, $10. Thank you, Sump Pump. Did Akita reveal the third secret of Fatima? Like the third secret, it seems to be ignored by the Novus Ordo. Sister Agnes passed on the Feast of the Assumption 2024.
I have no knowledge of Akita at all, so I can't comment on it. And I don't know anything about the third secret of Fatima either. So I'm a blank on that. Sorry.
Heartland 29.49 for $5. Thank you, Heartland. What CDs should I pop into my SUV to play during long road trips? I think some young people might ask what a CD is, Your Excellency.
Yes. Well, any sort of medium. Well, I would say it depends. I when I'm falling asleep, I put on Beethoven because he's slam bang. It's as my father used to say, it's when the lightning hits the outhouse. That's Beethoven, and it is boom, and so it wakes me up. But normally I listen to Baroque or classical period. Classical period is Haydn, Mozart, and people like him. Those two. Bach is Baroque. Handel is Baroque. I mean, there's a lot of that music, a lot, and so it really, you have to sort of develop a taste for which ones you like best, but there's some good romantic ones too. There's Mendelssohn, who has some great pieces. It depends on what you like.
All right. Matthew Joseph for $5. Thank you, Matthew. Your Excellency, do you know of Bishop Thomas Sebastian, who is with the Society of Christ the King? He is a non-unicum bishop. Thank you.
I've only heard of him, but I don't know. I don't think I know anything about him.
Okay. Teodoro Boggio for $5. Thank you, Teodoro. How are lete sententiae excommunications actually applied in light of the thesis? How are they automatic if a declaration is needed?
Well, you could incur just by law an automatic excommunication, but they do not have effect unless one of two things be present. Either you admit your guilt or your superior holds you to observance of the automatic excommunication. Why the church has automatic excommunications, I don't know. It could be that the effect of it might, therefore, if your superior, for example, insists on it, might take place. In other words, that it has its effect before there is a trial, where there is a declaration. See, then say your pastor would inform the local bishop would have a trial, and then he would declare you excommunicated by a declaration. See, so that's the way it works. So if nobody says it, I always use the example of a pastor who's sitting in the back of the church or standing in the back of the church, and he hears the deacon say heresy in the sermon because of stupidity, or he got it tongue-tied or something. And the pastor's just going to say, "Oh, that idiot." He's going to roll his eyes. He's not going to say anything to him after Mass except, "Don't say this again. You made a mistake." And that's all he's going to say. But technically speaking, to pronounce a heresy from the pulpit is an automatic excommunication, technically speaking. But if the pastor does not enforce it, then nothing happens.
Again, from Teodoro Boggio for $5. Thank you, Teodoro. If abortion is ever again to become completely illegal, should the penalties enforced be mitigated for women of today, since many of them are misled? I think, for example, jailing for manslaughter, that sort of thing, jail time, Your Excellency.
Yes, you cannot hold somebody legally guilty for a law that doesn't exist. I mean, there's a moral law, which is a whole other question. But
he's saying if they were to come back into force and then people were to have them.
You can't have retroactive. That's a general principle of law. You can't make something retroactive.
But could you have it going forward? I think he's asking.
Well, yes. I mean, it really is murder. So, I mean, it should be treated as murder, I would say. Cold-blooded murder. But
So both ways, Teodoro, we can't retroactively apply the law, and that His Excellency would look at enforcing the law as it was before. Another question from Teodoro. Thank you, Teodoro, for $5. Sports have become a replacement for religion. Should all professional sports be abolished, according to a talk by Bishop Dolan and Father Chikata some years ago?
Well, I would agree with that. You know, the purpose of sports is recreation. Recreation of both of the mind. It's a game, just like checkers is a game. So there's a recreation of the mind, and there's a recreation of the body. You're running around and kicking a football or something. The idea of doing that professionally, it just exalts it as some sort of nobility. I always say that people in professional sports should be paid minimum wage. It is such a low calling with regard to, the people that pick up the trash actually contribute more to society than people who play baseball or football professionally. I mean, it's just pure game. And why the crowds get so worked up over a game. It's just a game. And in that sense, it's no different from Monopoly or checkers. It is no different. And why do you get all worked up? It's just, it's but that's, the Roman Empire suffered from that. They had their favorites in the gladiatorial games, and it wasn't until the 500s that the church managed to suppress the gladiatorial games. That's how attached they were. Bullfights, the same thing. It's just an insanity that this poor bull should be running around and get gradually put to death by these people in fancy clothes. It's just insane. And people yelling, and then if the bull, gets the guy, that's really great, and it's insane. It's just barbaric. It's just barbaric, and it involves no brains whatsoever. It's completely dumb, So that's my opinion of professional sports. It just ruins the purpose of sports. The purpose of sports is both intellectual and physical recreation.
All right. Sede Trad, $5. Thank you, Sede. Is it uncharitable to be repulsed or irritated from the advice of a hypocrite?
Well, gold is where you find it. In other words, if he's giving you good advice, the fact that he's a hypocrite doesn't enter into it. It's just but he could be giving you good advice. Do as I say, not as I do. But sometimes do as I say is correct, and they're just too weak to follow their own counsels.
Jimmy Hunjan for £10. Thank you, Jimmy. Queen Mary, who ordered Cranmer to be burned at the stake, had primers during her reign printed with a translation in it. In Old English, world meant age or era.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that saeculum means age in Latin. So no, the church would never have used it if it had a heretical meaning. Never.
Good music for the soul. 7 Peruvian souls. Thank you. How can two sedes marry without sede clergy?
Peru, this is Peru. Father Bear will come and marry you. He's in Colombia right now. He's going to Ecuador in a few days, so he's not far from you. And so he will go down and he will marry you.
Well, the young man had asked previously how to meet a girl, Your Excellency. So I think step 1 is meet girls. Step 2, then potentially get married.
Somehow you have to, get into the internet, or I don't know. There's all of these, I don't know, trad. What do you call them?
Right. There's all sorts of activities and places to meet people. I think there's even
meet somebody at one of those.
Right. I think there's even a sede matchmaking site these days. So, Chedru Slibani, 20 Brazilian reals. Thank you. Besides the catechism, what should a layman who has some time to study focus on?
Well, I would say better or more, I would just say elaborate catechisms. The Catechism of the Council of Trent, for example, is excellent. It depends on what you mean by that catechism. And there are some other catechisms. The catechism put out by the Christian Brothers, It's rare to find it. I don't think it was ever reproduced, and I'd like to see it reproduced because it's excellent. It's a
Hmm.
3-volume set, and I have it, but it should be reproduced. And the you could read some of the works of St. Thomas, like his Summa Contra Gentiles, is not as deep as the Summa Theologica. Summa Theologica is over your head. You need a great deal of philosophy to understand it. But he wrote the Summa Contra Gentiles. It's commonly called On the Truth of the Catholic Faith. It's not as long, and that would be very good too. You could read some of the works of St. Robert Bellarmine, St. Alphonsus Liguori, for example, too. So there's a treasure. We have the advantage of living at the 2,000 years or better after the church was founded. Think of the early church when none of these things were available. Nobody wrote anything. The fathers, so we have that advantage that we have all of this literature, that all of this contemplation of saints, and that for many years, but there's many other things. So I would get into deeper catechisms. That would be one thing.
All right. Steve Gerard, $10. Thank you, Steve.
I'm cutting my
For maybe it'll come increase our live stream contributions if the cat makes an appearance, Your Excellency. For what I believe the 7th time, the heretical Cardinal Super Kupich and the heretical Archdiocese of Chicago has cleared the non-Catholic heretical priest Michael Flager. Do you know anything about this case, Your Excellency?
No, I don't, but I would say what else is new? I mean, again, the sunrise this morning. I mean, these are heretics.
Right. He also adds, God bless you, Bishop Sanborn and Stephen. Thank you. Stephen, thank you for your generosity. A more autobiographical question from Sede Trad for $2. How did His Excellency and Stephen meet each other?
Well, I remember you came down to you came down to Florida, and I remember you interviewed me in my office, and that must have been
it was 2009, Your Excellency.
9, okay, because I have a picture of it. So that was the first meeting, yes. So.
Yeah. Father Chicata was teaching there that week. He said, Father Chicata and I already started to do work about a year and a half before that. And he says, you need to be Bishop Sanborn. Okay, who's Bishop Sanborn? And came down there. And
I said, who's Stephen Iron?
Right. We had no idea who each other were, and had no idea at the time it would be the beginning of a many-year collaboration, which has become more frequent as of late. Much to His Excellency's chagrin, he has a lot more work to do, unfortunately. Damiano for $5. Thank you, Damiano. Your Excellency, do you adhere to the, I believe, Thomist position about pets entering heaven?
I don't know what the Thomists say. I really don't know. I never looked it up.
I don't know if he's joking with us, Your Excellency. I don't know if there is an idea about pets.
They don't have immortal souls, so but what God would provide for human beings as their accidental happiness in heaven, we don't know.
Who knows? Traditional Catholic Mama for $10. Thank you, Mama. What about music with a strong rhythm rooted in a traditional culture? For example, merengue, which was a drum-driven folk music, originated in the mid-1800s in the Catholic Dominican Republic.
Yes, I know. My parents went to dancing school, and they did that very dance. So I'm familiar with it.
Really?
Yeah, they went to dancing school. They knew how to dance rather well. Well, there's nothing wrong with rhythm. It's just when you make rhythm the only thing, cacophony with rhythm, that's rock music, but there's nothing wrong with rhythm. I mean, Mozart is full of rhythm. All the Bach is full of rhythm. The only thing that doesn't have rhythm is chant. See, so I'm not condemning rhythm. I'm just saying that it should not be the main point of the music. Otherwise, it's not music at all. It's just drums. So no, that's fine as long as that's a dance, and as long as the dance is modest. See, so that there's some of the dances of the 19th century and 20th century were not considered modest. I'm not, because I remember my parents did it and it wasn't immodest. So.
All right. Marie Catherine for $5. Thank you, Marie. What if I don't like classical music? I do love polyphony. Should I go to confession?
No. Polyphony is wonderful. Victoria, Palestrina, many others. You know, again, as long as it's music in accordance with reason, you know. But rock music departs from reason; it's perverted. But there's so much beautiful, so many beautiful things to listen to that you can just take your pick, whatever you like.
Mm. And Marie has also been a member for 2 months of the channel. Thank you, Marie. Father Disposito, I think, activated that before he started to get ill. So we'll see, hopefully, in the future about making the membership program have a few more benefits. But at the moment, just thank you for your support. It's an ongoing monthly pledge, I think. Diane Alice for $10. Does His Excellency recommend having the letter of final wishes notarized? With whom should we leave it?
Well, that's a question for a lawyer. In other words, if you want to make sure that your wishes are observed, you should go to a lawyer and have him do a last will and testament, because it has to go through probate. Otherwise, you're handing over your final wishes to somebody that's in your family, and they may or may not observe it. You see, so I couldn't make a general principle there.
This might be on Diane's mind, actually, because there was this week a re-release of one of their older episodes, a portion of it in which they were talking about the importance of not relying on the will, that you need to make arrangements for your funeral mass, etc.
Well, that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. The will is the disposition of your property, and that's open, whether it's the will or a letter, after you're dead and buried. All right. So yes, making arrangements for your funeral, that's with family members and people whom you trust, do that. But as far as the disposition of your property, that's something that you need to talk to a lawyer about. And see, each state has different laws. You know, make sure you.
But into this particular idea, you're actually she's saying final wishes, not maybe necessary last will and testament. I think in regards to having a mass said and those sorts of things you've said before, that needs to all be taken care of. You need to not put that in your will.
No, and it has to be given to somebody, and it should be opened at the decease or near decease of the person, so they can make the arrangements right away. In other words, you don't want to have something opened after you're dead and buried. If somebody's terminally ill and dying in the hospital, that letter should be opened, so that, and it should be somebody whom you trust and will go through with it, and they need to be funded.
His Excellency talked about all that. If you haven't seen it, you can go to the MHT Seminary channel. Back Questions for the Rector, episode 3 or 4, a very early episode His Excellency did. And there was a recent short video, maybe about 8 minutes long, which talks about some of this. So if you'd like to learn more, His Excellency goes into great detail in that episode. Good Music for the Soul. Again, some 3790 from Peru. Thank you. Oliver Cromwell let the Jews back in. They helped him revolt against Charles I because he had married a Catholic. After Cromwell died, James II, a Catholic, was crowned, and Jews financed William and created Masonry.
Okay. In other words, I don't know that history of it. I know the history of Cromwell and Charles I, etc., but I don't know the participation of the Jews in it.
Greg Panico for $5. Thank you, Greg. I enjoy lifting weights at the gym while listening to Gregorian chant. Is it sinful to work out at gyms with there being so much immodesty?
Yes.
I suppose you're only
all male or all female, in other words, and those are very hard to find, if any of them exist. But no, I mean, they always, you had girls' gyms and boys' gyms, in high school, and there should be no mixing there. It's an occasion of sin.
So if you can find a single-sex gym, then His Excellency is saying it's permissible. Santiago for $10. Thank you, Santiago. Relative to sports, I agree with the comment made by His Excellency 100%, except for the World Cup game, Argentina versus England. You should have been there for that 2-1 in the last 5 minutes of the game. Obviously, actually, Santiago being Argentinian is going to make, but alas,
how does that affect the world? Argentina beat England. What is better about the world or worse about the world? The fact that it means nothing. It means nothing. That a bird sings is more important than that Argentina beats England.
It's true. It's true. And Santiago, I did ask Father Desposio how it was that the Argentines played so poorly in the final match, and he was befuddled. He had no idea why they played poorly either. Jimmy Hunjan for £50. Thank you, Jimmy. I don't know, Your Excellency. The Novus Ordo says that sports are a wonderful opportunity for dialogue. And as we all know, it is by dialogue and accompaniment that we are saved. Perhaps that's why Bergie placed that beach ball on the altar of St. Mary Major.
Where do the players dialogue? All they do is fight with each other on the field. Why? Where is their dialogue? It's like a war.
Right. Yeah. If you're Argentinian, you punch people in the head. That's what happened in the England game.
There's no dialogue.
Michael for £5. Thank you, Michael. What years of publishing or imprimatur would His Excellency say generally makes a book safe or suspect?
Before 1958.
Well, you're saying I've actually heard you say 1950 as a general rule.
Well, much more. I mean, you. In other words, generally is the word there. In other words, it's generally safe before John the 23rd, but not always. You could get some with modernist tendency. I would say, even before 1950, some authors. It really depends, but I think those would be more theological authors that we would see. But for the general lay people, yes, an absolute date I'd say is 1950, but a probable date is 1958. After that, I would throw it in the trash.
All right.
Unless it's a reprint of something.
Chedrus Libani, 50 Brazilian reals. Thank you, Chedrus. I too agree regarding sports, but as Karpov used to say, chess is everything: art, science, and sport. Therefore, while it may be silly as a sport, it is beautiful as art and constitutes the only exception to the rule. So chess as sport, Your Excellency.
I wouldn't call chess a sport. I mean, it's a game. And there's nothing wrong with a game as long as you put it in the proper category of game. Professional chess, I would say, is a waste of time. And, human beings should not waste their times on something so stupid as that. But that you play a game, that's a very intellectual game. You have to do a lot of calculating, no, I would say it's a good exercise for the mind. Chess, it's far better than football or one of those other,
But you're still classifying it in that same way, or see if a professional baseball player, professional chess player, you still see it as a waste of time.
It's a waste of time, and it's a I'm trying to find the word for it, but it's a glorification of something that should not be glorified. It's just a recreation.
To draw that together, you're actually, because you said before, catching a football, not a big deal, but playing a chess, that does require more intellect. So you're not saying just because it requires more intellect that it's not a waste of time. You're saying it is just as much a waste of time as
a professional thing. In other words, catching a football in a professional way is a waste of time and a glorification of the body and of just recreation as something, practically divine. That is wrong. But catching a football in a normal game, between two teams that, just want to recreate, that's fine. And having a chess game as a Sunday afternoon recreation, that's fine. But it's glorifying these things as if there's some sort of it's a form of humanism. We're the greatest. Look at this, we're the greatest. That's where it becomes, I think, sinful objectively.
Okay. Marie Catherine gave us a $2 super sticker. Thank you, Marie. Very appreciated. Damiano for $10. Thank you, Damiano. Your Excellency, which church in the Americas do you regard as the most beautiful? And what do you think about clergy serving the state, like Richelieu? Well, there's two different questions. So let's start with the first one, Your Excellency. Which church in the Americas do you regard as the most beautiful?
Well, I've never visited, once I visited South America, but didn't see any churches. Mexico, I've never been to. So we're talking about Canada and the United States, all right? So, nicest church. Oh, boy. I'd have to think about that a little bit. I'd say St. Patrick's Cathedral is high on the list. I'm trying to think of some churches in Canada. The Cathedral of Quebec is magnificent. I'm trying to think of other churches. a very impressive church, although in 19th century style, is the Cathedral of St. Paul in Minnesota. Very impressive, and a very impressive setting on a hill. And the Cathedral of St. Louis is very impressive, but it's very odd because it's outside, I think, is Baroque or classical, and the inside is Byzantine, which I find very bizarre. Very bizarre.
Very beautiful mosaics in there. I think the church that you preferred when I'd sent you some photos when I was in St. Louis, Your Excellency, is the Oratory of St. Francis de Sales. That's Gothic and very traditionally French in its construction.
Yeah, so I mean, there are some nice churches in the United States, but I would say the winner is St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. That compares very favorably with European cathedrals.
His Excellency is also sharing a bias there as a New Yorker.
Yes, well, I was in the Brooklyn diocese though, not the New York Archdiocese. So, but still, but it does compare very favorably to European cathedrals. It does.
We're in the final 10 minutes of our live stream now. So if you have a super chat that you want to, if you have a question you want to ask His Excellency, as always, we do our best to answer as many questions as possible. But because there are so many questions, we usually give priorities to super chats. Continuing on the last two questions from Ryan Whittlesey that he sent ahead of time. Joseph de Maistre said in his Considerations on France, writing against the liberal idea of the so-called rights of man, I have seen Frenchmen, Italians, Russians, but as for man, I declare I have never met him in my life. If he exists, it is without my knowledge. I think this is a good critique, but I also know that man is brought up constantly in Catholic theology. Can His Excellency give a distinction between man spoken of by radical liberals and the man spoken of in Catholic theology?
Well, man is just a general term for human beings, so it's a perfectly legitimate term. It just means human beings in general. And so both men and women. So, I mean, there's nothing offensive to Catholic thought on that. No.
Sorry, Your Excellency, I forgot to ask the second question. What do you think about clergy serving the state? So Mazarin, Richelieu.
Well, it was very common. I mean, it was in the Holy Roman Empire. You had prince bishops. In the early Middle Ages, the bishops were running the state in the sense of the local areas. In France and Europe in general, they were the authority, the local authority. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. It could actually be very good if you had a cardinal floating around the palace, but I wouldn't say Richelieu. I consider him one of the biggest dirtbags of history. And Mazarin, his successor, was not much better. In principle, the idea that the church would be well represented in the palace, is a good thing. In principle, as long as the Pope gives his okay to it. So, Cardinal Wolsey. Now he's a too, but it was fairly common.
I read recently that one of the main reasons governments in East Asia were so hostile to Christianity was because they were afraid Christians would subvert Confucian values and make people unproductive, like the Buddhists did. A Chinese government official from the 8th century writes, "Today, the Buddhist clergy throughout the empire eat but do not till, clothe but do not weave. They disseminate dangerous talk and theories of pessimism with which to deceive the ignorant. The annual cost of food and clothing for a single monk amounts to some 30,000 in cash. The taxes applied by 5 adults do not equal that amount." Hypothetically, if His Excellency had the choice to respond to that government official, what would he say to advocate on behalf of Catholics to distinguish them from the Buddhists?
I would hold up Western Europe to them and say, there is no civilization on the face of the earth like that of Western Europe, and this was created by Catholics, and that should say something.
Right. That case closed, I think, Your Excellency.
Case closed.
This is sort of a miscellaneous question that someone sent a couple weeks ago, Your Excellency. I have a number of childhood action figure toys from the 80s and 90s. Some of the figures are bizarre and grotesque, which feel demonic in some ways. I don't want to sell them or donate them because someone else might be negatively influenced by them. But if I throw them in the trash, people could also easily get them. What should I do with them? They are currently stored away in boxes in a closet.
You could burn them, or
I was going to say, are you really morally responsible if you throw away something in the trash and someone finds it, and they're digging through your trash and they find your trash?
No, I don't think so. I mean, trash diggers, no, I don't think so. I mean, you wouldn't go to a lot of trouble to do it, and I think getting rid of those things, like putting them through a grinder or something like that, would be a lot of trouble, and I don't think you're obliged to.
A soul wrote this, Your Excellency, who might have some tendencies to scrupulosity. The quote is from Humility of Heart. In order that an act of virtue be truly virtuous, it is necessary that it should be so in all its component parts. And if it be defective on one point only, it becomes vitiated at once. A depraved intention, a single thought of vanity at the beginning, middle, or ending of any virtuous work is sufficient to corrupt and change it into an evil one. It is enough for virtue to be wanting in humility for this virtue, which is no longer humble, to cease to be a virtue and to become a cause of mortal pride. My question, Your Excellency, how is it possible to keep even the slightest thoughts of pride or vanity out of a meritorious act? I feel doomed, even when I attempt to do good, because I think I am doing good.
No, there's a difference between having a thought of vanity and consenting to vanity. There's a world, a universe of difference between those two things. You could have a thought of vanity, if you're elected to, if you're like the king coming out on the balcony and everybody's saying, long live the king and all. You could be tempted to vanity, but a temptation is never a sin, right? So I think the author should have been more clear on that. See, but if you turn your good works, you can vitiate your good works by consent to vanity. That's true. But vanity is usually a venial sin. I was a little surprised to hear mortal there. I mean, usually vanity is a venial sin, almost always, unless it has serious effects, mortal effects.
If there were to be a formation for religious brothers, what would be required of their formation, and what would they learn? Would they learn about modern errors?
Not necessarily. They go through a novitiate, which is mostly their training in the spiritual life. See, and also depending on what they would do, other training, if they were going to teach, for example, they would be taught the subjects that they were supposed to teach. If they're going to do manual labor or other things, they would be trained in that. You see, but mainly it's to establish a spiritual life. That's a novitiate.
We're into our final super chats. Again, thank you to everybody for their generosity. Thank you, as always, to His Excellency for being on the hot seat for what is now the custom 2 hours. He knows if he's going to sit in this chair, he's just going to have questions. Andrew McFarland, $20. Here's a little something so Leo and Betty can have wild caught tuna. Well, that's always
like it. I put down chicken from the table. In other words, really nicely prepared chicken in front of them, and they turn their nose up at it. They just like a certain brand of dry food. That's all they will eat.
They have
but
very.
I appreciate your thought. Thank
you, Andrew. It will be put towards a toy which they will reject from His Excellency and never want to see again.
Yes.
St. Mary's Kansas Liquor Store for $5. Thank you, St. Mary's. Recommendations on writings to supplement daily meditations or mental prayer.
St. Francis de Sales, St. Alphonsus Liguori. Those are very easy reading and very, very good. Imitation of Christ. Other saints, but those especially, and they have very prolific writings.
I'm going to also include a link to the bookstore. There's some there which the titles that His Excellency has approved, including, trying to remember, there's a particular person that I know you've approved, Your Excellency, and it's right on the tip of my tongue. Unfortunately, I don't remember, but I'll put a link in the description. Mm-hmm. All right. Jimmy Hunjin for £10 asking on behalf of Father LeMay. Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for your generosity in getting Father LeMay's question flagged up here. What is His Excellency opinion on the great debater, Dr. Fauci? You might know him from such lines as, "You can't believe everything you read in the New York Times."
Are we talking about the same Dr. Fauci who was sitting in Congress today?
Yeah, yes.
Did you see how
so.
he was burned at the stake, practically by those senators?
I didn't watch it, but I heard clips. I saw someone asking him what color is his tie,
Yes.
and what color, and he refused. He tried to invoke the Fifth Amendment, but as someone pointed out, legal precedent is he has no Fifth Amendment rights because he's been pardoned.
Also, the Fifth Amendment does not work in Congress.
So they said that you'd have to escalate and threaten arrest to get him to testify. But
Yes.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Great debater, Dr. Fauci. I mean, we're talking about the same person.
I think he'd put himself forward. I think Father LeMay is asking facetiously, Your Excellency.
Yes, those three senators though did a job on him. I was so glad I was not on the receiving end of that. They did a job on him, and they were very, very good.
Yeah, congratulations to their staff for preparation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Panico for $5. Thank you, Greg. I work in data analytics working from home. Would it be sinful if I got another remote job, therefore working 2 full-time jobs at home?
No, if it does not, with the condition that it does not detract from your duties at home. See, that you give enough time to your wife and your children. So that's.
I think he's asking about the morality of construing that he is a full-time worker at one job and a full-time worker at another job simultaneously.
It depends on what the employer requires of him as far as full-time.
Right. If he's able to do his work.
Yeah, it all depends on what the employer demands. See, it's contractual. If he says you must work a certain amount of hours on what I give you, then you're obliged to do that. If he says, I just want you to do this project, and then I don't care what you do implicitly, then you're free.
Yes. I remembered the name of the person, Your Excellency. It was Dom Boylan, and we have a couple of his books in the bookstore.
Oh, yes, he's very good too, yes.
The Catena and Father Lean is also being recommended.
Yes, Father Lean is very good too. Yeah, if I could get to my bookcase, I would, rattle off about 10 or 15 of them.
And we're being consoled by Marie, Your Excellency. Don't feel bad. I smuggled home some caviar from an honorary dinner, and my cats rejected
it. Yes. Well, that's to train you. You see, they probably were attracted to it and probably had to do a great mortification. But what was more important is that they tell you that, we don't care how much you spent. We don't care, how impressive this is for human beings. We don't like it. And so that's to train you, and then you feel bad, you see, and then you want to please them more, you see. That's the whole psychology of cats.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Since the church considers Latin, Greek, and Hebrew sacred languages, is it possible that there were early Christians who had Mass in Hebrew?
I guess, well, don't forget the Hebrews at the time were speaking Aramaic. And it's interesting that even when our Lord was on the cross, he said in Hebrew, Lama, Lama,
Eli, Eli.
Eli, Eli, Lama Sabachthani. And that in Hebrew, I mean, I took some Hebrew. I know what that means. That means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Eli, anybody that knows basic Hebrew would know that's my God. The E on it, the little I. El is God, and the I is my God. Anybody that knows some Hebrew would know that. And they said, oh, he's calling Elias. And that's the first line of a psalm. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? That means they were not even familiar with the Psalms. And they were not even familiar with Hebrew, a basic Hebrew.
Right.
So I think it shows the ignorance of the people at the time. And I would say probably they may have read the scriptures in Hebrew, which they do to this day. But as far as any kind of other service going on, I think it would have been done in Aramaic. So in other words, the Jews read their scriptures in Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew, to this day. But they probably, I'm guessing that they did that in also the early church in those lands, in what is the Holy Land and various other lands around there where there would have been Aramaic, but to preserve the traditional language, than Hebrew. Let's see. So, and the inscription on the cross was in Hebrew, not in Aramaic. So, but we don't know.
Again, these are answers we'll get at the general judgment if you're still curious about it at that time. Just going through and making sure I got all the super chats. Damiano had said I'd forgotten a second question about Richelieu. I posed it. Thank you for the reminder, and thank you for putting a super chat to remind. And the last question for today, Michael for £5. Thank you, Michael. In what ways, if any, can demons interact with the physical order? How should we respond when non-Catholics claim miracles?
Well, the first question, demons are angels who did not lose any of their nature, and they are extremely powerful beings. And I always cite the one author that said, if they had bodies, they would be as big and as powerful as the sun. All right? That's how big angels are and how powerful they are. So they can do extraordinary things, and they can do things that imitate miracles. For example, when the priests of the Pharaoh also turned the staff into snakes, the explanation for that is that the devil substituted the snakes so fast for the staff that no one noticed it. See, they're very swift, so they can imitate miracles. Absolutely, they can, but they can't do true miracles. But they can imitate them. So God cannot perform a miracle in confirmation of error. So if something is contrary to faith, then no matter what supernatural phenomena there should be, it is bogus if it's contrary to faith, if it does not confirm the faith.
So that's the answer to the second question here, how to respond? Because there's been a few shorts recently, Your Excellency, where always the retort is, what about all the Eucharistic miracles of the Novus Ordo? How can you say the Novus Ordo isn't valid? And your response is, those are not true miracles.
Well, does it confirm the Catholic faith?
Well, as always, Your Excellency, thank you so much for spending 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours with us. And as usual, we will have this question and answers at the end of next month. And then we will continue on the MHT Seminary channel with questions for the rector. So you'll see that in a couple weeks. And if you want to get your questions in ahead of time, remember, you can just use the Contact Us form on MHT Seminary or at RC Institute. And you can send in your questions. And if you want to send in a donation, you can. It's not required, but it is appreciated. And if you're watching this later after the live, remember to hit the like button. Remember to comment if you have questions. But a reminder that the clergy do not monitor the comments on these. So if you have a question, send it in using the Contact Us form. Don't submit a question using the comments. Your Excellency, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.